Welcome back to History Class with Dr. W and our discussion of American cultural history. In the previous lecture, we began talking about a phenomenon around the turn of the century between the 19th and 20th centuries, the crisis of masculinity, and a number of factors that contributed to that crisis. In this lecture, we're going to talk about one of the men at the forefront of the movement to restore American virility and masculinity, President Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt is regarded as one of our most robust, fittest, and athletic presidents, described by one historian as our most athletic president, and he's celebrated as having done a great deal to advocate the so-called strenuous life during this period. While Teddy Roosevelt very much represents the changing mood of this era, we have to be careful not to overstate his influence. He was not the savior of American sports, as one scholar has put it, nor was he a messiah or a changer of everything, as others have claimed. Nonetheless, he was influential and a strong advocate of masculinity and virility. Roosevelt's backstory may be familiar to you. A sickly child, he was urged to undertake rigorous outdoor activity by a doctor. From a young age, he found confidence and health in activities such as horseback riding, hiking, boxing, and hunting. He kept a collection of squirrels that he had killed and stuffed under his bed. As he grew to adulthood, he became recognized not only in the political realm, but also as an advocate for hunting, vigorous sports, and military activity. At Harvard, he boxed, played early versions of football and other sports. Like others of his generation, Roosevelt seized on the opportunity to charge into battle with the advent of the Spanish-American War in 1898. He formed the Rough Riders, a group of 100 or so cavalrymen, comprised largely of his old football buddies from Harvard. The chance to charge up San Juan Hill, ill-advised though the attack might have been, represented the ultimate test of manhood for Roosevelt. Roosevelt is known to have been one of our most active presidents. He was constantly hiking, running, and fishing around the grounds of Washington, D.C. He also adopted tennis as his personal favorite pastime. This is a bit ironic, as tennis was a game suitable for women and not among the manliest of pursuits, but he played for hours at a time, at a rigorous pace. Roosevelt is also known as both a spectator and fan of sports, and one who participated in significant discussions related to sports. He especially enjoyed watching football games, the closest thing to combat in his book, and even charged the field during the 1901 Army-Navy game. With a yell that was distinguishable above all the pandemonium there, he sprang from his seat, leaped the little fence in front of him, and was on the sidelines, one report said. In middle age, his image as a fit athlete dwindled as his belly grew. Roosevelt, also a fan of fine eating, struggled to contain his weight in his later years, leading some scholars to question those who claim his significance in the athletic realm. Many historians have credited Roosevelt with creating in the presidency what is sometimes known as the bully pulpit. That is the idea that the president is the center of attention, that everything he utters is of significance and worthy of being followed by reporters. This was a relatively new phenomenon, as prior to Roosevelt, many considered prominent senators or Supreme Court justices the most important figures of Washington, even above the president. That changed with Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt carried this compulsion to theorize and preach into the realm of athletics. Roosevelt scholars have compiled what some call the Roosevelt Athletic Doctrine. It includes some of the following points. Athletics should be functional and utilitarian. The purpose of athletics is to promote fitness and a vigorous lifestyle, not money or even pleasure. The most useful sporting events also involve physical pain. He favored blood sports, which at that time included football, which was very violent. Overcoming physical pain was an important test of manhood, in Roosevelt's book. He also advocated only amateur sports. Sports should not be a profession and shouldn't substitute for service to society or other work. He fought against professionalism in sports. And finally, sports were intended for men. We'll talk about women's sports a little bit later in this course, but as far as Roosevelt and many others believed, women should not participate in vigorous sports. As a corollary to this thought, Roosevelt often spoke about his 4 sons and their athletic accomplishments. He never discussed such activities for his 2 daughters. With these core beliefs, Roosevelt was among those who believed the positive influence of sports was almost unlimited. It created better men. It created better soldiers. It taught toughness, determination, teamwork, and honorable values. All of these combined in Roosevelt's call for the men of the nation to live what he called the strenuous life. He wasn't especially concerned with wins or losses, but get out there, play hard, participate, be physically fit. So how was Teddy's message heard by the American people? Well, we might say the reception was mixed. Americans clearly were becoming more interested in sports. College football was beginning to boom. Major League Baseball was already entering a period of great prominence, and boxing and horse racing as well were wildly popular. Yet for many Americans, they might have heard Teddy's words about the value of athletics and noted that he showed up at many sporting events. But their primary interest in sports lay in watching, cheering, and perhaps betting on the games, rather than participating. Especially for working-class Americans living in the big cities, finding opportunities for vigorous outdoor activity was difficult. Many did pursue athletics, but others just preferred to watch. So this period marks the advent of major spectator sports, as much as participation in sports. We should also note that Roosevelt, as influential as he was, didn't always have his way either. Women, despite Roosevelt's misgivings, took to sport in large numbers. Again, something we'll talk about in future lectures. In 1910, when Jack Johnson won the heavyweight title over Jim Jeffries, Roosevelt advocated banning his fight films, and even supported a ban on boxing itself across the country. Despite his concerns, boxing continued to flourish. And Roosevelt's concerns about professional sports went largely unheeded. Major League Baseball, in particular, continued to flourish, and other professional sports were on the rise in this era. In other cases, Roosevelt's influence took hold only slowly. Most famously, Roosevelt played an important role in changing the game of college football. For years, football was played as a bloody and dangerous game, even deadly. In the early years, mass formations were the norm, as entire teams often targeted a single player, steamrolling him in the attempt to gain just a few yards. So violent had college football become that in 1905, 19 players died from football-related injuries. At the urging of many key figures, including the coach at Harvard, his alma mater, Roosevelt intervened, meeting with several of the coaches, along with the Secretary of State, to consider changes. Banning the mass formations, limiting violent plays, and adding safety features to uniforms were all reforms considered at that meeting. And yet, the following year, no changes were implemented, and dozens more deaths followed. After the 1906 season, changes did come incrementally, with the formation of what would become the NCAA, which I discussed in a previous lecture. Roosevelt's own school, though, Harvard, only joined the organization in 1909. So while Roosevelt was important, he could hardly be considered the savior of football. Even after his intervention, many schools dropped the game, and many people argued that it was too violent for true college men to stoop to playing. With all that said, though, Roosevelt clearly is important in the realm of American culture and sports. He participated in sports more vigorously than almost any other president before or since. And he did speak about sports and manhood more than others, bringing attention to the issue. He also compelled the press to discuss these issues more openly, again deploying his bully pulpit to wield the press to discuss the issues that he thought were important. And finally, he did inspire the nation. Not always perfectly, but the nation did clearly move more in the direction of manly, vigorous activity under his influence. In the next lecture, we'll talk about another man who was very influential in the resurgence of masculinity around the same time, the bodybuilder and powerlifter Eugene Sandow.